Good morning, everybody. Craig DeLeo here. Today is the first video I'm actually putting in through my YouTube channel, so we can actually put decent sized videos as well as actually having, exchange and talk. But today I'm actually going to talk about DoGE, and I'm actually going to start doing my videos and trying to be a little more positive and not actually trying to assign blame, because blame is stupid. And I'm going to continue to try to be positive because arguing with people and trying to fight with people is not healthy. That's not what I'm about. But one of the things I'm going to talk about today is DoGE. And I applaud, I'm going to assume, and I'm going to go with that answer. And we won't go into the discussion of the word assume and what the word assume has its connotations. But I'm going to assume everybody had the best intentions when it came to creating DoGE. However, I said from the get go, DoGE is a great idea. However, it's doomed to failure because waste, fraud, and abuse has been an initiative that we have had in the federal government since I want to, at least in the military, since before I was born. Okay, so this is a 40 plus year old. I want to say it's probably a 40 plus year old initiative. My father dealt with the fraud, waste, and abuse discussion when he was in active duty. Okay, because I said something to him this weekend about it, and he's like, "Yeah, we did. I remember that from when I was in the Navy." So, and my dad's been retired since the '80s, so that's how far back fraud, waste, and abuse in the DoD goes back. I remember it being discussed left and right. Oh, fraud, waste, and abuse. There was someone who got some big old Navy award because I want to say it was a she when I was at Portsmouth, saved the DoD some ridiculous amount of money, or the Navy some ridiculous amount of money because of some supply, she saved us some ridiculous amount of money and got some big award for it. So this is something that the Department of Defense and the military has been looking at for that decades. This is something when I was a federal employee that was on the forefront is fraud, waste, and abuse. Um, so this is not something new to us. So finding fraud, waste, and abuse and finding efficiency gains is something that we've cared about. Now, as someone who has worked both as a military employee, as a military member, I want to say employee because as much as being in the military is not an employee, you're an employee. Being a having been a actual federal employee, having worked in the private sector as a normal person, normal corporate employee, middle management, the responsiveness and the way you solve these issues is completely different. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed is the fact of the way the corporate, the way the federal government operates and the way these agencies operate are completely different to each other and completely different than the way we operate in the civilian world. And even between different branches of the military, we operate and work completely different ways. Heck, even between the Navy, being green, what we call green side Navy, we operate differently than blue side Navy. Heck, we used to jokingly as a corpsman, as medical, white side, what we call jokingly called white side Navy, operates differently than green side medical Navy. Every single one of these every one of these agencies operates differently. Um, I use even the VA, and I use the VA as a wonderful example. The Social Security Administration, when I worked for Social Security Administration, had this wonderful records management system that did a wonderful job doing disability law. It was an electronic system. It was accessible completely 100% remotely. So we could, when you had the access, you could operate it completely remotely from home. You could work from home. It was a wonderful system, just brilliant system, you know, but it was different than the system the federal courts used. It was different than the system the VA disability system used. Heck, at the time, Social Security was 100% electronic files. They were trying to go 100% electronic files. There were still some legacy files that were paper. The federal courts were near 100% or trying to move to 100% electronic files. The VA at that point in time was still paper. Their medical side, the actual care side, was 100% electronic files, but the actual disability side, paper. They had no electronic file system. So there's a efficiency loss right there. Having to take electronic medical records, convert them over into paper records, just so you could do a disability evaluation. That was an efficiency loss. That was a huge efficiency loss. But that was acceptable for that agency. The fact of, and even worse, is the policies and procedures, agency to agency, are different. And the problem is each one of these agencies, as they've grown and developed, have grown up and developed independently from each other. This is not necessarily a bad thing. They're working and operating as efficiently as they can within the confines of the law and the rules that they've been applied. Congratulations. Chevron deference has provided these agencies the ability to operate independently and with as much discretion as they've been given. However, they've operated with individual policies, with the discretion to operate as effectively and efficiently as possible. And the problem is the way Social Security Administration chooses to be as efficient as possible is completely different than Department of Labor. And many federal employees, as they cross from one agency to another agency, still doing, labor law, disability law, have seen these changes and seen how drastically different each one of these agencies operate. They're operating brilliantly efficient. However, they're operating completely differently. And trying to apply corporate America rules from on high when it comes to being efficient doesn't work, because if you drug a corporate entity, operates efficiency because they started out in one area and they then branched out, creating their extra entities into the efficiency of the main body. The federal government operates completely different. We have created all these different agencies operating in different ways, and we've allowed these entities to, instead of conforming to the mass, have operated independently. So of course, what it looks like inefficiency is actually each individual entity operating as efficiently as possible within the confines of the guidances of those agencies. No wonder DoGE failed. Or they haven't failed. I'll phrase that. I don't like that answer. They didn't fail. The problem is they did not find the inefficiencies that we believed they would find. And Elon didn't find these inefficiencies because they're not there. They're operating as efficiently as they can within the confines of the rules. And then the only way to make everything operate in corporate America efficiency, the way he thinks they should operate, is going to require a teardown of all these agencies one by one. And ultimately, I truly believe any of you who were to do that is literally to go to the federal government and tear the whole thing down. Not necessarily like tear down, but literally rebuild these agencies from the ground up with an efficiency plan so they were all operating the same way. You're going to create inefficiencies that are going to ultimately either going to be cost neutral or make them run more expensively, because you're trying to make them all run the same way. Ask any military member that's worked with other branches of the military. The Army does not do things or operate the same way as the Navy. The Navy and the Army doesn't operate the same way as the Air Force, the same way as the Coast Guard. Each one of these branches of service operate completely differently. It's actually quite confusing when you're trying to do what we call purple commands or purple operations, to try to talk the same language, or even just, it's language difference. We use different acronyms. Trying to, heck, even worse, then go to NATO. I mean, we all talk and operate in different ways. We have different policies and procedures when it comes to our supply. Of course we're going to have problems. Of course what looks and appears to be inefficiencies is just our own independent way of doing these things. So guess what? No wonder DoGE had issues. So it takes someone like myself, who's worked and done all these things and tried to navigate these problems and actually evaluate them as they're not inefficiencies. They're just the nature of the beast of these individuals. And it's just everybody has a different way of doing things. And it's not wrong, it's just different. And it's just, we have to celebrate, as with everything with this world, they're not wrong. You just have to celebrate their differences and just embrace their differences as being joyous and wonderful. So, again, Craig DeLeo, hoping to hear more from you. And again, like and follow the Facebook or not the Facebook, like and follow the Facebook. Join me on my YouTube channel. And again, I'll continue to do more of these videos, and hopefully we'll continue to do some lives here soon. And again, hope to, you know, well, hopefully, and again, one of my promises is, as if I do become one of your elected officials, I will continue to do these lives and these social media posts at least once a week. That way, we can have some more, clarity with our government, because that's the thing I keep seeing is we don't have the clarity we need for our shipmates. It's the fact if you guys don't see what's going on and you have to dig so much and dig in 8 places just to find out the reality of what's going on, and it bothers me. So again, have a wonderful day, and be safe out there.